Senator Joachim Henry, Leader of Opposition Business.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me say good morning to everybody. It's a time that some time has passed since I last spoke in this House. And of course, this morning I would like to speak to the motion that is now on the floor. But before doing so, Mr. President, I would just like to remind us, since the last time that we were all in this House, quite a few persons have gone on or passed away, and all of us are here again. And Mr. President, is something that I note and I continue to reflect on, that all parliamentarians that have been part of this House, both from the upper and lower house, are still alive. But through sit-ins, many persons, St. Lucians, young people, would die through various means. And therefore, I want to use this opportunity always to say thanks to the Almighty God for life. And it is that life that I take not for granted. But as I stand here today, I really want to speak from my heart what I know to be truthful, and do it with respect, but also recognize the opportunity and privilege given to all of us to be part of the proceedings in the matter relating to St. Lucia. Mr. President, I just like to cite, and I would have done so had I been there earlier on, the two young persons, young ladies who, my daughter's friends, who died in the car accident, just at age 18 and 19. Also a baby who died in a fire in Lacroix, and another baby that was strangled in her playpen in George Charles Boulevard. These experiences of the various families that have undergone these traumatic experiences continue to reflect on my mind, and I just like to take note that not all of us in St. Lucia having a good time like it seems, and therefore the solemnity of my presentation is consistent with the time that we are living in, recognizing that away from St. Lucia and the different parts of the world, we are hearing of terrorism, we're hearing of fires in London where my mom lives, and on London Bridge people are stabbing, and we are living in a very chaotic world, and the challenges are insurmountable as it seems. So we here in St. Lucia, and those of us who have to participate in government business, I do say that we need to, from time to time, recognize that it's a privilege and an opportunity to do so. Mr. President, I also need to cite that my presence here, while I appreciate it, I'm humbled by it, recognizing that there are so many St. Lucians out there who probably know far much better than I do on some of the matters that we discuss here. I do not think my presence here suggests in any way that I am more qualified than everybody else, but that the opportunity offered to me I do humbly accept, and therefore as I present I recognize that the individuals, the skill and talent of St. Lucia is so far in terms of its breadth and depth that we inside there need to humble ourselves as we subject to the discussion, knowing that there are other persons listening to us. And therefore, Mr. President, I move into the more substantive motion of the government's business to borrow sums as described in the motion. Mr. President, there's one question that continues to linger on my mind as we deal with government business, and this question is fundamental, and I ask the question, for who? And this, if the question is asked, for who do we do these things, I think it will help us understand some of the questions being asked. Why are we doing what we do? For who? Is it for ourselves? Are we borrowing to enrich those who already have? Are we doing it to address those who are marginalized? Are we doing it in keeping with what is happening in the world today? Are we doing it bearing in mind the situation in St. Lucia? And the first I would like to submit to this House, Mr. President, is the issue of crime. Not crime in terms of the incidence of what's taking place now. I think if I speak of it as what's happening this year, I think it would be considered political. But when I looked at, and I deliberately, Mr. President, looked at crime from about 20 years moving on, and I plotted the trend line in the statistics that I found, I recognized that from about 1996, 94, 95, crime has been on the increase. We moved from having 12, 14 murders a year to 20, to 30, to 44. And today in 2017, we are just halfway in this calendar year and we're already 29. What consideration, how are we thinking of these things as we make the decision? It's in this context that I want to make this my contribution. The issue of our young people and the various communities where a lot of them are marginalized and where gambling seems to be taking control of our various communities. Gambling. The poorer communities. The single mother's household who are unemployed. It is in this context I speak to what we're doing and how does it relate? How do we connect? Mr. President, I would like to also acknowledge that as I do so, that I'll do it within the understanding that I have as a quantity surveyor, first and foremost, because, Mr. President, I've only been in this parliament for a short time, but I've spent 25 years working as a quantity surveyor. And there are some things that I understand a lot better, and I do not understand everything as I would like to, and therefore I subject myself to those who've gone before, the literature that exists. So therefore I would like to make reference to a document that has been document of the House, but if it's not, I will gladly make it available. It is a document from the IMF country report number 09 of 257, and I'm sure the leader of government business would be very familiar with this document. 209. St. Lucia request for disbursement on the rapid access component of exogenous shocks facility. And during that time, of course, it was under this administration that the IMF made a visit, the annual visit to St. Lucia. St. Lucia had just gone through a recession. And they met with the experts in St. Lucia, the staff of the Ministry of Finance. And they were discussing what are the measures, how should the government at that time approach the business of St. Lucia. It was the honorable member, parliamentarian for Castries North, was the then Prime Minister, if I'm correct. But just to quote, am I correct? Castries North, Mr. President, yes. Just a little snippet into what they showed. 2004, real GDP as a factor, of course, was just 3.8. 2005 showed that in 2005, 4.4, moving on to 4.9. There was a slight decrease in 1.7, but moved to 0.7. Fiscal balance, 0.7 in 2004, negative 3.0, 2005, negative 2.6, showed an increase. What did the IMF say at that time to the experts here in terms of the management of the economy of St. Lucia as it relates to borrowing. As it relates to borrowing at the time then. And I want to make, I use this because the context of it is that it was the same administration who is now managing the economy who was managing the economy then. And I want to see if there is a pattern, if there's some consistency, if there's adherence. What is the government posture towards advice from these agencies? The IMF, the World Bank, the CDB. A, fiscal policy, and I quote Mr. President, the fundamental challenge for 2009-2010 is defining the role of fiscal policy can play in mitigating the adverse effects of the weak economic environment without derailing financial and macroeconomic stability. And they went on to say there was limited scope for increase in discretionary spending and the deterioration in social conditions with high and rising employment. That would imply refocusing of expenditure towards social protection. Refocusing expenditure towards social protection. The mission sought the authorities' commitment to a credible strategy that would maintain governance finances on a medium-term sustainable footing while preserving and possibly expanding a pro-poor spending. Pro-poor. Spend monies to the advantage of the poor. Dépenser l'argent côté les pauvres qui ont bénéfice là. Dépenser l'argent côté moun qui pas ni sa hand. In 2009, the IMF suggested or advised the government, the then government, that things were getting real bad socially. And of course, they would have cited crime, a very important indicator. Crime was on the rise in 2009. And I said, the backdrop to my presentation, that I looked at the statistics of crime. 1996, 9 murders, manslaughter. 1997, 12. 1998, 14. 1999, 14. 2022, 2001, 24. 2002, 35.
Senator, I'm not wanting to interrupt, but can you cite the document?
Got this from the Statistics Department. And of course, that can be made as a document of the House of everything that I do. From the Statistics Department, it's online. But generally, and I think we can agree, and the expert who is here, there's an expert in terms of crime fighting, the minister responsible for national security. Crime has been on the increase. And the social deterioration of the country at that time, the IMF suggested that we should have embarked on a pro-poor and the possibility of expanding social programs or safety net, social protection. And I asked the question in 2017, si nous kay pouete quantité l'argent pour qui ça? Ek bay ki moun? For what? And in answering that question, Mr. President, I suggest that if you answer the question of the budget, for whom and what, it may very well give some indication. For who? And of course, construction seemed to be a major activity in the context of St. Lucian's operation. Construction. Mr. President, I will tell you, as a student of the construction industry, I do not believe in the construction industry like a lot of persons do, because I am integral as a quantity surveyor, and I understand to some extent the property market. That's where I'm an expert. I'm not an economist. But I understand the construction industry. I understand roads. And there is a very important perspective I would like to draw to members. And that is from a book. I've made a document of the House also from Ralph Morton, looking at the construction of the UK industry. A very important. It says that it showed that most of public sector infrastructure spending, for example, is now expenditure on major road schemes. That's the former Department of Environmental and Transport, that's in the UK, let over 500 million of road maintenance contract during 1998-1999, as well as a number of major new road schemes. The department was probably the biggest spender on construction for all government departments. I'm talking about the UK still. The Department of Health was another big spender in 2000 and in the year 2000. Hospital building, they had PFI, 4.5 billion, another 544 million pounds was spent. And Morton was highlighting that the government, or the UK government, was spending largely in the construction industry. And he asked the question, why? Why? Two reasons is given. One, the need for more prisons, more hospital. Maybe that's one of the reasons why the government would spend more money constructing this. But there's also a second reason highlighted by Morton. The second major determining factor certainly is the pass through, perhaps no longer so significant, that has been the state of the economy as a whole. Under the conventional Keynesian economic policies, government spending, in particular capital spending, were used to control fluctuations in the economy as a whole. So in times of recession, as output and employment fell, government would increase spending to stimulate economic activity. And in times of boom, when inflationary conditions threatened to get out of hand, government reduced spending for both economic and administrative reasons. Unquote. But what I would like to cite to this Honorable House, Mr. President, is the arrangement of the UK construction industry. And who are the participants? And why would the UK government believe that construction can be a tool to stimulate the economy? So there's quite a bit of construction activity, but look at how it's arranged. You find persons operating at all levels in the UK, and they train personnel to operate within a very complex construction industry that can build hotels, well, not just hotels, schools, airports, railway tracks, and the like. The capacity to do so. So I ask ourselves, when we are borrowing money for this economy, where should the focus be? And how do we get the benefit from such borrowing? How do we get it? Is it by construction and running the drains? Who are the participants? And how do we go about allocating it? There are laws and procurement laws in the UK to ensure that this business of construction is at a sophisticated level. The Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors and the various professional bodies are highly recognized, even at the level of the royal family. And their participation and how they regulate what obtains. In St. Lucia, what happens? And that brings me to a question that I asked that was not answered some time ago. And I beg your indulgence, Mr. President. And that was the issue of the audit of the St. Jude Hospital. When I asked the question, what were the terms of reference associated with identifying a professional to conduct? I was cited then that the question was not answered, said would have answered previously, but also indicated that the information is on the website. Answered would indicate that we have a way of getting it. And I've made it a document of the House and I just want to reference at this time a concern all members would have as it relates to certain aspect of what we do. Mr. President, I went through the document and I picked up the terms of reference, July 31st, 2016. On the St. Jude terms of reference, St. Jude Hospital gave a background indicating when the hospital was built. 1946, there was a second major hospital in St. Lucia. Hospital was damaged by fire. The government of St. Lucia commissioned the reconstruction of St. Jude Hospital in 2009. Works are currently ongoing and the civil works has started. But, Mr. President, I cannot help, even in reading the background to the terms of reference, as someone who at another time was associated with the same project immediately after the fire, that terms of reference did not cite the conditions under which, because I was then in the Prime Minister's office, in the cabinet room, with PAHO, and with other significant players discussing the approach. Mr. President, all I'm trying to get to, in summary, before I get there, I'll say it, is that most times we speculate on corruption. We speculate on a lot of things happening wrong without having an appreciation, one, for who we are as a people, the level at which we operate, and focusing on how we can do better. We take each other down first. So here I was when the fire took place, because the agency I was responsible for at the time, Mr. President, was about to erect a 100,000 gallon water tank for St. Jude. The contract was signed. And here came the fire. And the Prime Minister called and said, we need to abort. What do we do?
Mr. President, I rise subject to order, Standing Order 37-1. Standing Order 37-1, and I think also 31-2 and 3. It says that subject to the provisions of these standing orders, debates upon any motion, bill or amendment shall be relevant to such motion, bill or amendment, and the senator shall confine his observations to the subject under discussion. 2 says, reference shall not be made to any matter on which a judicial decision is pending in such a way as might, in the opinion of the chair, prejudice the interest of parties thereto. And 3, Mr. President, it says, it shall be out of order to attempt to revive any debate, a matter, or reconsider any specific question, or than a matter or question relating to a bill returned with any amendment by the Honorable House of Assembly upon which the Senate has come to a conclusion during the current session, except upon a substantive motion or rescission. Mr. President, I believe this 37-1 applies here more forcefully. The honorable member is speaking of a subject matter which has absolutely no connection, no relevance to the motion at hand.
Senator, Leader of Government Business, at this present time, I tend to disagree. And on the basis that is the way the Leader of Opposition Business is going about presenting his presentation. And he's asking the question, what's the relevance and for whom? You see, he started that way in making his presentation. For whom? What's the purpose of the borrowing? And he's just going about laying his presentation and questioning whether, I'm not sure where he's going with the St. Jude, so I'll monitor the St. Jude's.
Mr. President, I have answered the question about the purpose of the borrowing, haven't I? I think I clearly...
No, there's nothing wrong with you answering that, but he can question it. and he can indicate that the borrowing, the reason that you've given is not sufficient.
Mr. President, he has not questioned the reason why I gave for the borrowing. That's what I'm saying here. He has not. He has gone off tangent, completely off tangent. It was very clear as to the reason why we are borrowing the 103 million and the $262 million. The 262 million were for rollover. I haven't heard anything about the rollovers yet. Absolutely. The 103 is for the funding of the capital program.
Lead of government business. I will allow the presentation for the time being. I am monitoring it, so very well.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I beg your indulgence. You will see where I'm heading to it, where I'm heading with this issue. I'm asking the question from a philosophical standpoint of what we do in government. Why are we doing it, and for what in specific terms? And I'm saying that the borrowing is to finance this capital budget. The borrowing is to finance the capital budget through which you will get the operations and programs of government. And of course, the efficiency for which we deliberate, we do these things are important. But how do you look at efficiency and accountability in government operations? It is through the procurement of arrangements. It is through due diligence. It is through the various instruments and actions of government, even when other governments have carried out projects. How do we react? And here was this administration, when the previous administration was implementing its programs and came into office and saw the need to do an investigation. I'm saying this budget also caters for the office of the Auditor General. There's an office, there's a report tabled in this Parliament, a report from the Auditors General, isn't there? And there's an allocation of $1.something million in recurrent expenditure to finance the office of the Auditor General. But the action of this administration upon taking office saw the need to spend $1 million to carry out an investigation into the St. Jude Hospital. But look at the terms of reference. The terms of reference, Mr. President, I find is very interesting. The terms of reference spoke of accreditation, for example. And I asked myself, when we carry out due diligence in terms of what we spend in the monies for, we ask the question, for who and for what? Who is supposed to benefit? Look at the deterioration, the social climate that we are in. Qui moun qui kay han bénéfice là? Qui moun, by qui moun nous ka fait tout ça nous ka faire? Là nous ay prêter quantité là qui kay ni pour payer pour tout jeune moun qui kay venir dem espadier. Question c'est by qui moun? Et là nous point exemple, yon $100 millions qui dépensé à sous l'hôpital St. Jude. Côté gouvernement ça là ouais nécessaire pour faire investigation. Moi dit gardez qui ça qui écrit. One of the things I recognize is this book of accreditation. I'm saying, are we building hospitals for it to be accredited? Are we building health centers? There are plans to build health centers. Are they going to be accredited? I know, Mr. President, none of our hospitals are accredited. St. Jude is not. Tapio is not. Tapio fell out of accreditation. I did my research before I came here. None. Victoria Hospital has never been accredited. However, if you're going to carry out a technical audit, how do you ask the consultant of a technical audit to determine accreditation of hospital? Accreditation of hospital have to do with its operations, not its physical. So you pay $1 million to a civil engineer to carry out an audit. You feature in the terms of reference accreditation, whether it is through the Canadian board. But an engineer cannot. It is a group of professionals, medical professionals, that could look at the various operations. And Mr. President, I say this because as St. Lucians, we continue to look at our professionals with some kind of contempt.
Senator, you have 15 minutes left in which to come.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I will get to the... Look, our professionals are a value asset to this country. A valuable asset to our country, our professionals. When the Victoria Hospital got burnt, I was the quantity surveyor on it and worked with the French. I worked on the extension of Victoria Hospital for the new maternity wing. As a quantity surveyor, as soon as I heard the investigation, I said, for what? Why spend $1 million? For what? And if, as a professional, if we have respect for our professional, and we are concerned about the monies we're going to borrow, or monies we're going to pay interest, monies that our children are going to spend, we need to be careful how we spend it. And I'm seeing, Mr. President, one, the rise of crime. So the same condition this administration had to deal with back in 2008, 2009, when in the same report the IMF said, they said that they would raise VAT. In fact, a lot was promised in terms of fiscal measure they would have embarked on. This administration, but they did not. And in fact, the IMF said, we are happy to know, almost in a celebrative tone, that the UWP administration in 2009, and they gave 2010, will implement VAT and will be the leader in the region. That's stated in the IMF report. They did not. The fiscal position as a result deteriorated even more. And now we have a government back in office. Look at the actions. For whom? Who are the ones leading this thing? Who are you consulting? Who are you speaking? And for who are you doing this? One of the things we noticed, the trend, is that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer in this country. And if we are not careful, Mr. President, and I'll tell you, and I'll make this point almost to really come to an end in my contribution. When we build high-rise buildings, Mr. President, high-rise building, a large percentage, pretty close to sometimes about more than 40%, is in the services of the building. The elevators, the electrical, the air conditioning. Imported services to come in St. Lucia to do. The only place where our people participate is in the concrete and mortar, providing that it's not a high-rise, because cranes and operators could do the work in a flash. So when you build high-rise buildings in Beaufort, whether it is through DSH, will you think going to get benefit? Of course, our workers will work and they will get the $150 a day. If they are a supervisor, they will get the $60 as a laborer, $80. But they will retire with waist ache, just like it has been in the past. As a matter of fact, most of the workers they get the same rate when they go and build plywood house for people anyway. You know who it benefits? The large corporations. Check, for example, the waterfront building when I worked at planning, $20 million. Care International, who in Conway got richer as a result of the development at waterfront? Who in Latok, living behind the hill, got better off as a result of Millennium Highway? Who in Millet now is a millionaire as a result of the millions spent for Rosedam? In as much as I believe that these projects are important, we must not give the impression that these construction undertaken under the Keynesian policy or theory of economics will benefit ordinary poor people. It will work in large economies where the construction industry is arranged for people to participate at that level. This is the point I'm making. So in the UK and the more developed economies where you have large businesses, where you have the volume of construction activity taking place to develop the construction sector, and people are being trained to work in the construction sector, that happens. Do not give our people a false sense of security that when we invest in bricks and mortar, they will do better. Agriculture did that for us. It was agriculture that grew our middle class. Why? Because the farmers send their children to school. The farmers send their children to school. The farmers were also able to care for their children because they left their farms early. The hotels that we build in, Mr. President, the people working some shift hours, they're not even there to care for their children. And if you look at, again, our crime statistics, it's rising. It's not an incident that crime is 29 because the UWP is in power. That's not why we have crime, because you're in power. As a matter of fact, the Prime Minister, when campaigning, should not have made a statement that SLT did nothing about crime, and he will. Because had he paid attention to the trend, he would realize that it has been rising and it continues to rise. As a matter of fact, I have a very interesting reading that I got on the police website, that was written by the then Deputy Commissioner of Police. He's now the minister. He wrote a paper, and it's there on the police website to read. It said there that Emil Durkheim, classical study of crime, he stated that crime is both functional and inevitable. He goes further to indicate that crime becomes dysfunctional when the incidents of crime are either too high or too low. And he went on. Very interesting paper that was written, and it's there for some time. He wrote it when he was in the business of fighting crime. So what we have before us of borrowing to run the business of this country, more than ever, if before we used to take it for granted that we could do this thing, continue to increase the debt of this country, as hopelessness continue to fill the corridors and the streets of our city, we will not be safe in this country. We will not. And I'm just asking that this side of the house, the government, whose business it is to do this thing, to put measures in place to prevent a useless audit of spending $1 million for something that was absolutely not necessary. Absolutely not necessary. I've went through the entire report and I have not seen substance. If it is a technical report, Mr. President, I would have expected to see the testing of concrete. I would want to read about whether they excavated a certain part to inspect to see what kind of foundation. I would want to see they comment on the architect. But when I looked at the terms of reference, they said the person doing the audit must have just minimum 5 years experience. Can you imagine an audit of a hospital? That person doing it must have a minimum of 5 years. That means you just come from school to audit a hospital. And $1 million. And I understood from somebody that the leader of probably can correct me, leader of the independent member, the auditing of the banks. I do not think that you would pay $1 million to audit a bank. A construction activity, and then all of the information is there available. But notice, Mr. President, there's silence about this. And this is where, as a country, we need to develop political maturity and not develop what I call political giantism, where everybody inside of it believes, because they're offered the opportunity to speak here, that they are experts on everything. They medical, they can talk about the hospital. If you talk about, I noticed they're talking about quantity surveying. I will not respond to remarks made about myself in this house, because one thing I've said to, didn't listen to my wife. I mean, don't get inside of there, they'll talk about your business. I say, I'll bear it. So I'll not respond. I'll endure it. Talk about me. But I'll tell you, I'm a quantity surveyor for 25 years. And anything that I've done, take me before the right set of people and let the right set of professionals analyze it. I'll respond to them. But anybody who is not a quantity surveyor want to stand up in this house and hold a piece of paper and wave to try to discredit my profession, I know, well, I have to endure it. But I will endure it. Because it's absolutely not necessary. It's what I call a disease where you overgrow in politics. You become, it gets too small for you. And this is where we are in St. Lucia, you know. Disrespecting professionals. When I meet
5 minutes left.
Yes, I'm taking this thing down to its logical conclusion. I mean, Mr. President, taking everything away, the leader of government business is an economist by profession. I will listen and notice I have not delved into GDP and all of these indicators. I will subscribe to a few textbooks that I've read and research what he said and consult with a professional to find out everything he says there, whether it's making sense. But I expect that I can speak as an authority on quantity surveying and the cost of buildings. I can speak on the cost of roads. I heard road that is less than 18 kilometers is being built for $18 million. How could that be? $1 million per kilometer? I'm saying that we need to be extremely careful, and these things are being discussed. And don't try to spare my name. Don't try to spare my name, because the people out there, you know what they say? You're tout same mem. All of us are the same. Maybe not the independents, but they say that about both sides. You're tout cavole. You're tout say this. So when we attack and try to discredit one side, it resonates on the other side even more. I was told that our debate is okay. In other jurisdictions, that the debates are worse. I say mine is not okay. We need to bring it down to the level at which we can operate, Mr. President. Reason being, and this is my opinion, if we want to have parliament debate like those richer countries, give us the money as well. We do not have the money, our population is smaller, we need to be different. We need to have something that works for us. We need to have something that can resemble who we are. Who we are. You understand? And this is why I say that we need to ask the question, for whom? Who will benefit when we loan these monies? Because certain persons have lined up themselves to benefit from these activities. And the poor people of this country will forever be placed on the side. And we would not be able to grow a middle class that is so important in the service industry. The agricultural sector did it. But now we need to think again. Because the tourism sector is providing more challenges for our population than we can believe. It's not how many jobs we create, but where are the social safety nets and social protection to manage these children when their parents go and work in the hotel at 6 o'clock in the evening and coming back midnight? Where are the programs? And you abort the single mothers program. You abort some of our nice programs. You abort some of the safety net programs. And I thought we would have consolidated, or I thought you would at least adhere to the advice given by IMF when they said that we should expand, we should look at the possibility of expanding a pro-poor spending. A proper spending. And I'm not talking about, no, you see, a proper spending, it must be direct. It must not, you must not look to see how you spend it, give it to the rich, and then call them and say, hey, did you employ 10 persons from there? Look, $1 million, employ the people from the area. No, that's not what I'm talking about. This is what leads to the corruption. We must engage our poor people directly. And Mr. President, I am serious about that because I've worked 15 years with them. UWP or SLP, a poor person cry the same. They cry the same, they have the same issues. Their homes get burnt and we no longer have the distress fund. Are we going to put in the distress fund? Mr. President, when I last checked, when I called the fire service 1 year, I asked how many families we have that have not been addressed. The fire service told me fire victims hardly ever recover in St. Lucia. At that time, the independent member I mentioned when she was at the bank, our senator, independent senator. Yes, I discussed it. And I said, we have a problem in St. Lucia. The fire service told me that Fire victims hardly ever. So I said, let us get all of them, bring them in a hotel. Let's do something to see what we could do for them. I each tried to build one home for one. The Ministry of Planning gave me a stop notice. What's the proper approach? These are the things that I've been advancing
Senator, wrap
in
up,
government.
please.
Mr. President, we are borrowing money and we have borrowed in the past. Government need to come and do its business. I share my contribution to this honorable house that we need to, more than ever, ensure that the people who deserve help in this country gets it. We must not use government resources, borrow money for our children to pay, but give it to a few people who get richer while most of our poor people get poorer. Thank you very much.